Tanishikiawa, Nimiyoya Ndishinikashun Dylan Miner. My name is Dylan Miner. I'm an artist, activist, scholar. Right now I'm in residence here at MOCAD, and the show is called To Build Up Invincible. I'm a former Wobbly, dues not paid, but involved in the Wobblies in the early 2000s for some time. If you don't know, the Industrial Workers of the World, or IWW, or Wobblies, are early 20th century, still active today, but were most prominent in the early 20th century, a radical labor union founded in 1905 in Chicago, on the heels or following up to the Haymarket affair. So I was involved for some time with the IWW, and as an artist whose practice is based in archival and oral history research, I've engaged in a project here in Detroit, looking at the fact that the location of MOCAD sits around 3 blocks away from a former IWW Union Hall, and just down the road, down Woodward towards the river, underneath what is now the rubble for the new stadium, was another former Union Hall. So this exhibition comes from my own engagement with the archives at Wayne State University, looking at lost radio broadcasts from the 1930s, a series of IWW Wobbly radio broadcasts, looking at those transcripts and then pulling out poetic fragments from those and making a series of banners from that. Carlos Cortez Coyopuica was a Chicano or Mexican-American artist based primarily in Chicago, involved in the IWW, and was a well-known printmaker. And he was in many ways my informal mentor, aesthetically, politically, artistically. From him, he was very active for a long time in bringing together Native American, Indigenous, and Mexican American, Latino issues, and showing the ways that these all are related to labor struggles, to working class struggles. As someone who works in this vein, much of my work, I think, extends some of that. I myself am descended from Métis peoples, so basically people of mixed descent who worked in the fur trade, always crossing the US-Canada border. Much of my practice brings together radical politics, local histories, and movements of indigenous resistance. As an artist who came of age at a time where I was involved in punk rock and making zines and this sort of agitprop aesthetic tradition, I'm interested at this point in merging or engaging with the very politically engaged nature of, say, imagery that resists. As we just had and have ongoing struggles against extraction, whether it's pipelines, Dakota Access Pipeline or Keystone XL, we're seeing lots of resistance both within Native communities and with others, resistance to extraction. Here in Michigan, we see in the Upper Peninsula something called the Back 40 Project, which is an open pit mine along the Menominee River near the border with Wisconsin. And so for both of these issues and for others, I've made relief prints and illustrations that are directly opposing these, and then they circulate via social movements and via the internet and in other ways. And so I operate in those positions as someone who's making direct partisan, obviously intentionally political images. With the banners in particular, they're clearly trying to play with the poetic nature, yet the politically engaged nature of these fragments of text, but then include a series of small drawings of animals, local animals here in the Great Lakes, but also referencing some of the pre-colonial, pre-European, pre-nation state drawings of ochre on rock. Through the duration of this summer, there's 5 components to this exhibition, To Build Up Invincible. There includes a reading room where we're sitting right now. There's a mobile screen printing press, a DIY or makeshift theater space, as well as the series of pennants and banners that encapsulate the space here in the museum, as well as a socially engaged project called Mutual Aid. And that's basically, I'm an artist who tries to make work that exists outside or parallel to capitalist modes of circulation, and so don't frequently sell my work. But here at MOCAD, if individuals contribute to a mutual aid fund, they will get gifted to them a pennant, one of the pennants. There's been 1,000 printed. But if they contribute to the mutual aid fund, they get a gift back of one of the pennants. And once the exhibition closes, basically those funds raised will be given to two separate individual groups. One here working with youth cultural workers here in the city of Detroit, connected with a program here at MOCAD, as well as a friend and collective mate of mine, Melanie Cervantes. She's a Chicana printmaker, poster maker in the Bay Area, who's kind of dealing with health issues and kind of cancer treatment at this time. So using that funds to assist her in her treatment and in paying for that medical care. I'll talk briefly about the different elements within the exhibition. So we're sitting in the reading room. It's called the Wawiyatanong reading room. Wawiyatanong is the Anishinaabemowin or Ojibwe word for Detroit. It means kind of basically it was translated into French for Le Détroit or the Straits. It's basically where the river curves or bends. So this reading room is basically the creation of a small library, and the intention is to create a visiting space, a social space where there are, as you can see, a small selection of books dealing with both Detroit's history and non- and anti-capitalist histories and futures. So the idea is that this space will be one where people can visit, people can sit down, engage with the written text, as well as engage with individuals and others. And this is an extension of a larger project I have called The Elders Say We Don't Visit Anymore, which is the creation of temporary social spaces within larger institutions. Within the space, there's a series of 24 large-scale banners, printed kind of that combine imagery and text. Those are fragmented text, poetic text taken from old wobbly radio broadcasts. Those reference some early 20th century labor and kind of social movement banners, but remove them from the politic and kind of play with poetic fragments in interesting and I find engaging ways. Also within that, there's 1,000, as was mentioned earlier, 1,000 screen printed posters, 10 different images in editions each of 100, creating a kind of a vibrant and celebratory space. And I've worked for a number of years in pennants. As a young child growing up in rural Michigan, I was interested in sport and collected pennants. And when we look at the longer history of pennants, we often tie them to athletics culture and sport. But when you look at the use of pennants within social movements, within labor unions, within other entities, they have a much longer and interesting history. And for instance, at the Ruther Archive, they have a beaded IWW pennant that was made by imprisoned IWW workers involved in the Centralia incident. So there's this really interesting history, both locally, nationally, internationally, of evoking and using pennants for very different reasons. And so I have a history of working in pennants. I've done it on a number of occasions. Oftentimes they're taken outside of the museum or gallery space and then hung in public spaces, and over time kind of fall apart and kind of or are taken or something. The weather and the site changes on them. Another component of the exhibition is a mobile screen printing press. It's basically I've taken the frame of a work tricycle imported from Mexico. If you travel throughout Latin America, you'll see much of these work tricycles being used in lieu oftentimes of automobiles. So there's a tension here in the Motor City with kind of evoking and using non-automobile transportation. And so again, this is a continuation of other projects I've worked on. I work on a project working with youth, building bicycles, particularly with urban indigenous youth. But the mightiest weapon, again, taking its name from some of the wobbly radio broadcasts, has converted the tricycle into a mobile screen printing press, which will then kind of after the show be used, or throughout the show as well, be used to screen print in situ, and you can print pennants, posters, broadsides, T-shirts, whatever, and it can travel around the city to print on site. So what we're going to be doing, and everyone can just jump in here. It shouldn't be too messy. I've already got some black ink on the top of the mobile printing press, which is fine. I like to make a mess. We'll just make sure we try to keep your clothes and your hands clean. So this one that we're printing now, that will transform. If anybody wants to get in and do some printing, you're more than happy to. I can walk you through the process. So basically, there's two steps we're going to do. The first is called flooding it, where what you do is you take the ink and you pull it across the image. Then we're going to set the screen down. With this ink on this paper, we're just going to do one pull. So then what we're going to do is pull it towards you. And when you see the bottom of the image is done, you can lift up the pressure and it's squeegee. Okay. So it's been flooded. So then all you're going to have to do is start about that point. Okay. Yep. Put it about that angle. Okay. Push down against it as hard as you can and pull towards you. So this is the beautiful thing about screen printing. Every different printmaker has their own style and technique.
Oh, that's really neat.
Anybody else want to give it a shot? In addition, the last element of this also takes its name from IWW history. It's called With Bands Playing, and the title of that takes its name from a well-known IWW theatrical work that was performed at Madison Square Garden by striking workers from Paterson, New Jersey. And so basically, it's a well-known theatrical event. Tens of thousands of people saw it, and thousands were involved in its production. But I'm interested with this in kind of creating theatrical and creating spaces, community spaces that can be used as people see fit. Taking the infrastructure of the institution and the museum and making it more accessible. And so this is creating a small theater or a small performance space that individuals can use for speeches, theatrical works, and will be used in both organized and ad hoc programming throughout the 4-month run of the show. What I'm interested in spaces like this at MOCAD is how the museum, the gallery, the art world either does or doesn't exist within those same sorts of networks. So how can I engage with similar politics but make it not so kind of over the top? How can I engage with those radical politics yet make it an interesting and engaged and poetic installation as is this, that includes multi-dimensional components, that includes transforming of social spaces, that includes public programming, that includes workshops, that includes access to use of space, that includes kind of the creation of a mutual aid fund, right? So interesting, what I find interesting is ways that I can operate within all of these institutions simultaneously, yet kind of make work that's interesting at the same time.
That's the struggle.
The struggle we all have, right? Yeah. Yeah.